Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Tld Her, the podcast. I'm your host, Devyn Penny. I'm a certified self-development coach and author, and I'm here to have conversations with women in their 20s about my 20s, about the lessons I've learned, about the things that I think are really important to know about yourself, about the world in this somewhat defining decade. Yeah, that's what we're here to do. This week, I decided to go back to Pilates for the first time in probably 3 months. I got on a real Pilates kick last year, and then summer rolls around and you're just traveling. You don't have time to be consistent with it. And then I hurt my knee a little bit. And so I just was kind of milking that to not really go back fully. I do soul cycle a couple times a week and I love that. And I walk around the city obviously a lot. Pilates is the thing that I feel makes my body look the most different. It looks the most toned. I feel really good, but it is the single hardest thing I've ever done physically. Like, I was a boxer for many years, like legitimately when I was young, taught self-defense classes, kickboxing classes, did karate, like that was kind of my thing. I played basketball, whatever. Wasn't necessarily the greatest athlete on the team. Good cheerleader though, always got like best attitude award. But yeah, Pilates is a different level of hurt. Like, I did my class 3 days ago. I'm so sore and I have worked out since then, but it's from that. It's not from the other workouts. The level of muscle engagement in Pilates is unlike anything else I've ever done. With that being said, I do want to just talk about the fact that I hated working out for so many years. And it wasn't until last year where I did what's called the Hoffman process. It's something that's like very widely talked about on social media. Last year, I had just kind of been guided towards it so many different times by so many different people who I love and respect and think highly of, and finally was like, okay, I can't do the full program. The full program is like 7 days. It's super immersive. It was really expensive for me at the time. So I did their 2-day essentials program, which is basically just like an at-home thing. You do it virtually and you basically make sure that you are putting yourself in an environment that is going to work for a couple days of just being online. And it's like 8 or 10 hours a day. Like, it's a very still intensive situation. No television, they say. Like, you can't drink alcohol while you're doing it. You have to recalibrate like back into the world afterwards. And it really feels like that. You feel kind of like a newborn baby in the world for the first time. Like, I didn't drink for 2 months afterwards because I was like, how could I put this poison in my body? Don't worry, I'm back poisoning myself. But I feel like after that program was the first time that I actually felt in touch enough with my body that working out became pleasurable and became something that I actually wanted to do. For so many years, even when I was working out, I was like, I don't get what people are talking about when they say that they feel so much better after working out. Like, I just feel exhausted and I just feel like I'm depleted and I have no energy. Like, I just didn't get the physical, mental benefits that I felt like everybody was talking about. And it wasn't until I did the Hoffman process, which I will do a whole episode on because it really was like that amazing, that life-changing. And I highly, highly recommend it if you're in that space to be able to do something like that, just again, mentally, emotionally, physically. But what I found through that program was that I was so disconnected from my physical self. And I think that was just from years of so many different things, not really feeling my feelings, kind of suppressing things, really just never working on the physical aspect of things. Like, I say this all the time and I really mean this. The number one mistake that I see clients make is that they try to do everything at once. They try to physically overhaul themselves, spiritually, emotionally overhaul themselves, mentally overhaul themselves. Like, they try to do everything at once. And I was very, probably not really by choice if I'm thinking about it, but very adamant about the fact that I needed to get my mental health in a space where I felt good about things before I could really work on the physical aspect, because it just wasn't something that I could do at the same time. There was so much deprogramming that needed to happen that I just couldn't do both. So then when I finally got to a place where I was feeling like, okay, I've mentally kind of gained more control over the situation, I feel much better, and emotionally I feel much better. Now I can get myself into this physical practice. So the Hoffman process, and the reason why I discovered this in this process, was because there's a lot of conversation around this quadrinity, they call it, which is like your logic or your mental self, your emotional self, your soul level self, your spiritual self, and then your physical self, and how they all work together, which is part of my own private practice. Like, this is what I preach to my clients. But I think that what happens along the way is that we as adults lose our sense of physical expression at a very young age. And we don't feel comfortable like shaking things out, literally. We don't feel comfortable with physical expression. If you had a tantrum when you were a toddler, it wasn't necessarily because you felt like you were getting the most attention by flailing around. That's quite literally sometimes how emotions move through our bodies. So when you don't have that as an adult, and when everything just stays so bottled up and so stuck inside of you, it's a lot harder to be connected to that physical self. So the Hoffman process takes you through many different exercises where you're connecting all four pieces of this quadrinity together, asking questions to each individual piece of yourself. And honestly, it was the first time that I really ever had the actual realization that I live 90% of my life in my head. Like, I had almost overcorrected my mental health so much that this is where I operated from 100% of the time. There was no break, there was no respite. It didn't matter if I was doing a workout class or if I was swimming in a pool or if I was out to dinner with my friends. The constant machine, the constant overthinking was something that I just didn't even realize wasn't ever shutting off. So once I went through this process and I got in touch with my physical self and started to really pay attention to what my physical body needed, instead of allowing my brain to constantly override it, was the first time in my life that I've ever enjoyed exercising. Because now it wasn't about getting on a SoulCycle bike and thinking my way through it. It was about getting on the bike and feeling my way through it. And I've said this as soon as it happened to my mom, because I was like, you won't believe this, but there's like, you can track your workouts obviously in many different ways. But my numbers in my workouts post this program, like literally even like the first one that I did after the program, where I felt like I was actually connected to my physical self, were astronomically better. My performance was so much better than it was when I was so in my head. And I think that it was just a really important lesson for me to learn. And now that I do feel much more physically connected to myself, I think that it is something that has become pleasurable instead of like this major dread. Hence why I feel like getting back into Pilates years ago would have taken me years to get back into something, or to get into a different kind of workout, or to feel like, oh, if I go like and I'm not good at this, then it's going to be embarrassing, or I'm not going to enjoy it. Now I'm so connected to my physical self that I can recognize when my body says, okay, it's time to do something more like this. And then just honoring whatever that is I think really crucial just to living what feels like a good life. One way to just get in touch with your physical self now in this moment is to just start asking yourself questions, asking your physical body questions, kind of like locking your brain in its own private room for a minute and giving it some rest, and then allowing your body to speak to you and tell you what it needs, and then actually doing that thing. A lot of times it's not something super extreme. A lot of times it's sit down for a minute, take a little bit of a rest. I need water. I need a proper meal. I need to stretch and I need to have movement. I need some fresh air. Really just not questioning your body when it tells you what it needs and communicates to you that something is missing or that something needs to happen is, I think, a really easy way to get connected to your physical self. And then also just finding an outlet for expression, whether that's working out or literally dancing around your apartment. It's part of what we really need, and it's also part of what we really lack. So if you can do one thing for yourself today to connect to your physical body, I just would encourage you to. It feels really good to do that. Okay, switching gears completely. I asked on a Q&A yesterday on my Instagram what people wanted to hear on the podcast today, and there were a lot of questions about pivoting in careers, transitioning in careers. I think after the new year, a lot of people kind of take inventory and want to maybe move jobs or feel like they're not doing what they love or feeling fulfilled. And I am the queen of the career pivot. I am the queen of feeling stuck in something and getting myself out of it. I am the queen of making business moves that to anybody else look absolutely fucking insane and like they don't make any sense at all, but somehow making sense of them. So some of you who have been following me for a long time probably know most of this story. And if you do, you can skip over it. But just to give you some context, I started my first business when I was 16 years old. I had worked in retail at a boutique in Newport, Rhode Island. And I loved it. I was obsessed with it. I worked in the basement for the first 2 summers that I worked there, and then eventually got moved up to the floor and then just sold the shit out of everything in the boutique. I loved it. I was super salesy, really loved the fact that I could help people come in and change their entire mood with some really quick fix. There was a lot of conversation in these dressing rooms, even with a young kid. I was like 15, 16 at the time, but even with me, about women's confidence and how they felt about themselves and their bodies. I will never forget going into a dressing room and there was a woman, she was probably in her 40s, and she was crying in the dressing room. And I sat in the dressing room with her while she told me that she had just found out that her husband was having an affair and it had rocked her confidence, and she was shopping, but she didn't like anything and it was making her feel even worse. And we spent like 2 hours just getting a bunch of outfits together. That was the stuff that I loved. So I found myself at a very young age really enjoying helping other people feel better about themselves and more confident in their lives, their bodies, their physical self, their mental health. And there was a lot of vulnerability in that, a lot of emotionally charged moments in that I really loved. So I had this one client, she was awesome, and she came into the store all the time and basically just said, I always have so much in my closet. Like, I was here last week and I bought things, but I never have anything to wear. And I said to her, why don't I come over one day and I'll help you put outfits together? Like, it is that simple. And I do that here, so I can do it in your closet. So I went over there, I organized her closet, I helped style a bunch of things out of her closet. And from there, she told a friend who told a friend who told a friend, and I started my first business, which was closet organization and personal styling. I was 17 years old when I filed my first LLC. It was called Arriving in Style. And I had a website. I was very official. I also was like, oh, I didn't realize you could get paid for this. This was before, like, you could go into a Nordstrom and have a personal shopper. Like, now you can do all of these different kinds of things, but it really wasn't a thing unless you were thinking about people like in Hollywood who had personal stylists. So in Little Providence, Rhode Island, you know, a lot of people wanted this service and I just happened to be really good at it. So by the time that college applications started coming to the forefront of my life, I had already had my business and I wanted to continue to run it and grow it. But I don't want to say convinced, because I think that I did have some choice in the matter, but everybody told me, I had to go to college. I was coming out of a private prep school. Like everyone goes right to college. And it was just very much an experience for me that felt so inauthentic to who I was. Like it was the opposite of what I wanted to do. But I was very convinced by the people around me that if I got a business degree, that I would be more successful. So I applied to 3 schools, I think. I got into all 3. One was like an art school, one was like a liberal arts school, and then the other one was Loyola University, which was a business school I got into in Chicago. Ended up going there, knew that I wanted to be in New York, knew that I also wanted to just see a different place before I was going to move here. I always wanted to end up in New York from when I was a little kid. I loved the idea of being in the city and making a life for myself in the city. So I knew I was going to end up here. I just wanted to try something different beforehand. And obviously, my intention was to go for 4 years of school. At that point in time, from being a stylist, had clients that I was still working with, but I also, like a couple months prior, had met this guy through a mutual friend of mine who was a rapper in Boston. And he was like pretty seriously up and coming. Like he had a Pop Chips commercial with Big Papi Ortiz. Like it was some real New England shit, but it was legit. So I had met him with my mutual friend, and a couple months later, I was in my dorm room in college. This was probably like September, like I had just moved there. And he wrote to me and he said, do you have a boyfriend? I'd love to take you out on a date. And I did have a boyfriend at the time, which was crazy because who goes to college with their high school boyfriends? Oh, wait, everyone. And then you break up freshman year. I said, I do have a boyfriend, but I can style you for like your appearances and your music videos. Like, this is what I do. So the following month, I fly to Boston. I styled a bunch of stuff for him. We did a big shoot. Like, I worked with this team of people. Some of the people I'm still in touch with, I'm still friendly with, like really cool crew of young kids just making shit happen. I loved it. But I was in Chicago and they were in Boston. So I was going back and forth. That year, my freshman year, especially the second semester, I was so depressed. Being there, being in college, being away from my family, also not really knowing who I was without my family. And I just couldn't hide from myself in a single dorm room, completely alone with no friends in a place I'd never been to before. And I loved work and I was missing it. And even though I was working, it wasn't the same as having these hands-on experiences that I had. Being there sent me into my first of 2 depressive bouts in my 20s. Like it really messed me up. And it wasn't necessarily the school, it wasn't necessarily the location. It was just the fact that it was so, again, not an authentic experience for myself. It felt like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and I couldn't shake the feeling. However, in my head, I'm like every freshman in college feels this way, like suck it up, go home for the summer, come back. And I had full plans to do that. And then I got home. I was a shell of myself over the summer. And I remember just looking at my mom like halfway through the summer being like, I don't know how to say this any other way. I can't go back there. Like, I'm not okay. And luckily, I have parents who are very just like understanding and cool about things like that and really trusted us as kids and our decision making. And I said, I want to go to New York. I don't know where to go or what to do, but like, let's research and let's figure it out. So I found a school in New York called LIM. They had rolling admissions, which was a crazy process. It just meant that you went into their office, you handed them your portfolio. Luckily, I had a shit ton of stuff to show them, but they told you on the spot, yes, you're in, or no, you're not. So my mom and I are sitting there. It's like July at this point. Classes started 2 weeks later. I have no place to live. They have no more available housing on campus. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I got in. So then I was like, okay, I had to call people in Chicago, get my stuff back. I had stuff in storage there. Like it was honestly such a crazy time. And when I think about it, like I have such visceral feelings about it, but I have very few memories of like how everything actually happened. The next memory that I have is walking into my apartment that was under construction, and there was like a construction worker's clothes hanging in my closet. Like he was like squatting there, and I broke down crying. I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be on my own? Like that was crazy. And then all of a sudden I was in New York and I was at these classes and I was doing what I thought I wanted to do and what I thought I loved. In the process of all of that, I had many more connections in the music industry. Like I would go to a recording studio at 19 years old until like 2 o'clock in the morning, like by myself. It's such a different life at the time. But I had a lot of fun and I loved doing it. And then out of nowhere was approached with this possibility of buying a clothing line, which again, in my head right now, I think that what I love is fashion because the feeling that I have helping all of these people comes from clothes and accessories and getting people ready and seeing people transform physically in front of my eyes. Okay, I didn't love fashion as much as I thought I did, but this is the trial and error part of everything. So I get approached to buy this clothing line with a business partner. I do it. Another crazy experience. I was 20 years old when I bought this business. Lawyers involved, contract signed, like legitimate purchase of sale. This is my business now, president of the company, run it. So then I had access to this clothing line and branding it. And this was kind of at the beginning of social media stuff. Like we all didn't really know how to use it in a way that was actually going to help anything. I had no idea what I was doing. We did a lot of trunk shows. It was a very cool experience. I was also still going to school at this point. I think I had dropped down to part-time because I was working a lot. Around that same time, my marketing professor came to me, had found out about my business and had said to me, would you be the guest speaker in our class talking about how to market a clothing line? And I was like, in my own class, I'm the guest speaker in my own class. No. I was like, why am I here? And he seriously said to me, I don't know. Why are you here? So I called my parents. We had a big conversation. I said, I really just don't think this college thing is for me. Like, I did it. I gave it the old college try. It didn't work out. I love to work. It's like I'm passionate about everything that I'm doing. I want to really put my energy towards all these different kinds of things that I can do now. Like I was personally styling people still. I had this business. And now I was learning how to build the website for the business. I wanted to learn how to build an e-commerce site because, again, at the time, there wasn't really like a Wix platform or, an easy way to just build your own website. You had to find a developer. They had to have some creative ability to make it look good. And I couldn't find anyone who could do it. Like legitimately could not find anyone who could do it. So I just taught myself. I was like, okay, well, this is part of being a business owner. Like I just have to learn how to do my own stuff. Learned how to develop and design websites, did e-commerce website, and I had more people by the end of our first year in business coming to me asking me who did the website than I did who wanted to buy the clothes. Okay. So then I said, oh, if I'm really good at this, why don't I just go for that? And also, not for nothing, I didn't love working with a business partner. I'm kind of a does not work well with others person. I always joke about that like on a resume, if I ever had to give one, that would be on there. Like I am an independent person who likes to make decisions on my own. And it was fun, but it was also a lot of like, you had to ask this other person at certain checkpoints if you wanted to do something. Like I just don't have that in me. Like as soon as I have an idea and a vision, I just want to go for it and get it done. And I didn't love the checks and balances and the logistics of someone else having any sort of commentary about anything. It was just not for me. So I was okay with moving on from the clothing brand. At that point in time too, I had realized I actually didn't love the fashion industry. I just loved helping people and making people feel better. And the fashion part of that was the medium through which I was doing that at the time. So I opened up a full web design development shop, I called it, and I did 36 websites in my first year. Like I was the person, and I had relatively reasonable costs, but I really was good at it. I still am good at it, honestly. I still do all my own stuff. And for friends and family, I'll do their websites and things like that too. But I just had the knack for that. And bizarrely, I'm very tech savvy, which I didn't know about myself when I was younger. I was the person who was like holding onto my BlackBerry for dear life until they basically ripped it out of my hands and told me I needed an iPhone. Like, I don't love technology, the concept of it, but I do understand it bizarrely. So it worked for me until I realized that 36 websites in a year meant that you hardly spoke to anybody. It was a different level of working from home. It was like isolated working from home. And again, I was good at it and I was making a lot of money, but it wasn't fulfilling me in the same way that these human interactions were when I was styling people or when I was touching clothes and things like that. Like, I wasn't having any sort of real visceral experience. Plus, it's a pain in the ass industry. People want so much, don't know how to communicate that. I joke that someday in my retirement, I'm going to create a dictionary and basically like a glossary of terms for people when they're speaking to graphic designers and web development people about what they actually want, because moving this left and right is not actually what you mean. Anyway, I digress. At this point, I'm 24 and I had this like very serious boyfriend at the time. He was quite a bit older than I was, like 12 years older than I was. And one day I woke up and I was so sick. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, this is bizarre. Like, I never really feel sick like this. Couldn't get out of bed, so weak by the end of the day, was basically crawling towards the door, called him, was like, you need to take me to the emergency room. Like, something is wrong. I got there. They were like, you're severely dehydrated. Your blood pressure is really high. Your heart rate is really high. Like, we're going to give you fluids. We can't really see anything wrong. Doctor came in, basically said to me, you're exhausted. I don't know what you're doing, but like, you're way overrunning yourself. Like, this is your body shutting down. So I burnt out at 24 years old. For me, that was a moment where I was like, okay, what do I want to do next? Because this isn't working. It's not fulfilling me. It's not really what I love. I'm good at it. Yes, I'm making the money, but like, that sometimes just is not enough. It's like when they say love is not enough. Money's not always enough. It has to be fulfilling, at least for me. Like, it's a soul prison when I feel like I'm not doing something that I love. And I had known already from such a young age what it felt like to be doing something that I loved, that it was difficult to then be in a position where I didn't feel that way. What is the next step? So I had been working with this life coach since I was 21 years old. She was amazing, still is amazing. I love her. I attribute like a lot of my just sanity to her, confidence to her. She really helped me through a lot of crazy periods of time in my life, helped me through all of these different transitions, was like a very motherly figure to me at times, really was just so wonderful. And when I had this happen, I said to her something along the lines of, like, I don't really know what to do next. I just know that I really love to help people. And she was so encouraging. She was like, you could do what I do. Like, I've worked with you for long enough. I know what you do for other people. I know what you can do for other people, and you can do what I do. So I was 24, turning 25. I enrolled in this program that was like a coach's program. So I was doing that, and then simultaneously opened up what I was calling kind of like a brand shop. So it wasn't like the tech space necessarily, but it wasn't also full blown personal coaching. Also, there was a lot of stigma attached to life coaches at the time. There still kind of is. Like, even we don't like the title, I don't think. But I think that it wasn't being really taken seriously as a career path. And also, I was 25 fucking years old. Like, people at bars, grown men at bars at 2 a.m. were telling me, like, you don't have any experience. Why would you be a life coach? Not knowing me from Adam, but just those were the opinions. So I just took it in a slightly different direction at the beginning and helped people in their businesses. I did some consulting for a little while. Again, liked it, didn't love it. Finished up my coaching program and started what is now my practice. And then 3 months later, the world went into complete and total lockdown. And I think that honestly contributed to the success of my current business so much, because it just happened to be a time where everyone was asking for and wanting to receive help. So the pandemic was not fun, for sure, but it definitely was good for my business and just getting me into practice. Like, it was where I met a lot of even some of my current clients. During the pandemic, while I was doing this, I was hearing a lot of the same things. I decided I can write a workbook. I wrote an ebook. I figured out how to self-publish it. I published that. And then I wrote another book 3 months later that is called Everyday Affirmations. It was 365 days affirmation, thought of the day, journal prompt of the day. And I wrote it because I needed it. It wasn't something that I was finding. I wanted something that was non-denominational, not like a devotional. I wanted it to be unisex. I needed it for myself. I needed something to make the 365 days that were coming up better than what the previous 365 had been. And so I wrote this book. I got a publishing deal. I then really started to have confidence in my own practice and really feel like, oh, I can do this. I actually have something to say. I have a voice. I have an understanding of what I'm saying. And, this is important to me. So yeah, now I've been in practice. It was 2019 when I started. And so yeah, it's almost 5 years. The point of telling you that whole story in its entirety, and when I tell people this, I usually tell the succinct version of this, which is just like, it's a long story and you just have to know that I started in fashion and I ended up here. But the long version really explains how I pivoted and transitioned from career to career to career until I eventually found exactly not only what I want to do, but what I'm really good and gifted at. And I think that I can attribute the success of what I'm doing now to the fact that I was just open to whatever was going to come next. I have this internal navigation system, we all do, that basically says, yes, go this way, no, don't go this way. And the more that I trusted that, and the more that I stayed open to the guidance from my internal self, the greater my opportunities became. My world expanded literally in front of me, sometimes overnight. But my 20s were full of pivoting from career to career and figuring out what I liked and what I didn't like. And I found it really helpful to try to identify the feeling that I liked about what I was doing at any given moment, right? So when I'm talking about why I loved retail so much or why I loved working in fashion so much, it wasn't necessarily because of the actual industry. It was because I loved helping people go from feeling not so great to walking out of a store feeling awesome, or giving them the ability to have enough confidence in themselves to kind of take on this other persona in a music video or whatever the case may be. I loved that part of it. Even in the tech space, I loved people feeling like, oh, I have a legitimate business now that I have a website. Like, this looks so legit. Look at me. Like, I'm making strides. I'm excited about this, etc. I didn't necessarily seek any of these things out. That's not to say that I was sitting on my couch awaiting someone to approach me. I was working towards something always, but I didn't always know what I was working towards. Currently, I wake up every day and I say, may I impact the lives of others for the better, and may I enjoy myself while doing so, because it's important that I love what I do. For me, for my soul, for my world, I know that I am someone who needs to be closely connected with my career in a way that feels really good. And that's what I've done. So my best advice in pivoting or transitioning career-wise is, first of all, allowing yourselves to let go of the expectation that it's supposed to go a certain way. I think we all have this very linear and concrete understanding of success and what that looks like and what the exact steps we're going to have to take to get there are. And oftentimes it doesn't look like that at all. So being open to the possibility of things not necessarily being exactly the way you expected them to be is my number one piece of advice. Number two would be open to the opportunities that come to you. All of these things happened when someone just said, oh yeah, I have this friend who's selling her clothing line. You would be great at taking it over. Oh, I have this friend I want you to meet. He's a rapper. Oh, I have this person who comes into the store and she needs something to wear. It was all just someone in front of me giving me an opportunity to either be open and receptive to doing something new, and I chose to. And I think that that's really important. I also think it's equally as important to not look at the things that don't work out the way that you thought they were going to as failures. I don't consider any of my career choices or paths or jobs that I did as failed experiences. I loved everything. It was all necessary. I didn't love burning out that much, but I did love everything else. And I think that everything that I did, and you'll see this as you just advance in your career over time, that everything I did means something to me now and matters and helps me in my day-to-day. The same way that I was helping people find that confidence then is how I help people now. The same way that I was doing all of my tech stuff and learning all that helps me with my social media and being able to know how to upload this on YouTube and have SEO around it and do all of those kinds of things. And most importantly, listening to my gut. I didn't want to go to college. I knew that. It wasn't a mistake that I went, but it was important for me that I allowed myself to follow my intuition when I knew it was time. It's okay to try things. It's okay to fail at things. It's okay to be successful at things. A lot of times I think we're more comfortable with failure than we are success. Every person's journey is going to be very unique. So being open to the fact that you're going to have a different journey than your mother, your sister, your best friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your spouse, your grandparents, etc., is a major key. And I think that, again, following your intuition and just knowing that you have a lot of the answers within you is a very important lesson to learn at a very young age, and will help you a lot as you continue in your career. And just really believing that nothing is the end of the world and that everything and everyone presents you with an opportunity. Just being open to that. That's all. That's all I had to say. It only took me 40 minutes. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.